The Dalai Lama was once asked, "What is the meaning of life?" He smiled and answered, "That's not a hard question. That's an easy question to answer. The meaning of life is happiness. Hard question is, what makes happiness? Is it the car? Is it the house? Is it the money? Is it the accomplishments or the friends? Or is it compassion and good heart?" This is something that every human being must try to answer. What makes true happiness? It was death, my death, that made me wrestle with this question. The planning to kill myself by hanging myself from the beams of a Surrey hotel, or driving my car into a large oak tree, or throwing myself off the balcony of a tall building. And when I finally did decide to kill myself, one evening, lying in my cold, empty bed with a bottle of whiskey and a handful of pills and a plastic bag, it was my cuddly, affectionate cat, Tabasco, that jumped on my chest and sat there purring. And the love that I felt for him in that moment was what I needed to stop what I was doing. For that moment, I felt hope. Could I be happy again? Could I come back from that dark abyss that had been caused by the death of my beautiful, kind husband, Jeremy, in 2016 from a rare form of renal cancer? He was my soulmate, the love of my life. And we had fought family opposition and societal judgment to be together, and we had been together for 19 happy years. In that time, I had built an inner resilience as a result of family estrangement, struggles at work, and with anxiety and depression. And then Jeremy's cancer diagnosis and harrowing treatment. I held Jeremy's hand in those last few moments of his life. The death rattle getting louder and louder, and his breath getting more labored. I urged him to let go. His body was ravaged by cancer, and his soul did not need it anymore. And then, when he took his last breath and the life drained out of him, a part of me died too. He was gone, and with him all our promises and dreams of a happy future together. I was alone with my whole life ahead of me, without the love of my life, without my rock, without my very reason for being. Jeremy's death broke me. And for many months after that, I shunned everyone to become a complete recluse. And I turned to destructive ways of coping. I just wanted to die. And then 18 months after Jeremy passed away, my father, Ashok, also began to lose his battle with cancer. And I was hit with this huge realization. Here I was, throwing my life away. And these two men had fought to live, but cancer had got them. I had life. I had health. I had youth. And I was throwing it away. For what? As my father's eyes closed for the very last time, my eyes began to open. It was a time of awakening. I wanted to be happy again. I wanted to live again. I just didn't know how. You see, grief is a merciless master, and it will pull you down to the depths of despair in its vice-like grip And in that darkness, you think you will never be happy again. Grief is so personal and yet is so universal. You will all understand this because you will all have gone through grief and loss in this past year. COVID-19 has caused job loss, loss of financial security. Perhaps you have lost your health, physical or mental. Or perhaps you have lost someone that you love to this awful disease. Globally, we have lost the freedom to move, the freedom to make connections, the freedom to live what we believe are normal lives. And all this loss has caused a collective grief that each and every person on this globe has felt. How you deal with that grief will determine how you fare. If you, like me, turn to alcohol and painkillers to numb that pain of a broken heart, or overate comfort food to fill that void you were feeling inside you, or turned on the TV or radio to block out the sounds, the anxiety, the chaos in your head, or drown out the relentless silence around you, then you, like me, were turning away from grief and not allowing yourself to heal. You see, to truly heal, I realized I had to turn into the grief. I had to accept it. I had to acknowledge it. And I had to work through it. Because if I didn't, it would eat me up from inside and leave me completely depleted. Life is hard. It will throw us so many challenges to which we will respond. Between each challenge and each response is a space, and we must learn to use that space wisely and mindfully so that our response serves us best. How you respond to those challenges will determine whether you survive, whether you thrive, or whether you fall. After Jeremy's death, I realized that I had to acknowledge that I was at my most vulnerable. But from this vulnerability comes great courage. I had to acknowledge the devastating pain that had been caused. But from that place of pain comes compassion. I had to accept that these wounds were being inflicted on me for a reason, and only then would I gain wisdom. I had to build on that inner resilience that I had harnessed over the years, so that I could move forward with my life with new beginnings and a new life. But before I could build my life, I had to build every aspect of myself, my mind, my body, my spirit. And so I turned to different techniques. For the mind, I did mindfulness and acceptance and gratitude. For the body, nutrition and sleep and exercise. And for the spirit, altruism, connection, and compassion. And as I practiced and learned these techniques, I realized that you don't find happiness. You create happiness, you cultivate it. Cultivating happiness is not just about positive thinking, it's about positive action to create that deep contentment that we all so desire within us. I realized that when Jeremy died, I was living with the regrets of the past and the fears of the future. I regretted not saying something to him or doing something for him, and a life without him, a future without him, was paralyzing in its fear. And so I turned to mindfulness. And as I sat there, aware of my body and my breath, I became aware of my thoughts and my emotions. And I realized I had to start processing that grief that was within me. And I did. I cried. I shouted. I ranted. I wept. I screamed. And then, when I was spent, I sat still in silence. And then I did it all over again, day after day after day. It was exhausting. But then over time, the silence and the stillnesses grew longer and longer. And in those meditative moments, I even began to smile and laugh at some of those experiences and memories I had had with Jeremy. He had a fantastic sense of humor, quite dark. In those last few days, as we were planning his funeral, he said to me, "When my coffin goes through the curtain to be cremated, I want you to play that song from our favorite film, Dirty Dancing. Now I'm having the time of my life." Many of you will know that song. I looked at him in disbelief. "Why on earth would you want that song?" I said. And with a cheeky grin, he said, "Because I will be having the time of my life up there." Thanks a lot, you cheeky beggar. You've left me here to deal with this. But you see, that's just it, because every time I think of Jeremy's funeral and his cremation, I am left with a sense of peace, because I know that he is okay and that he is having the time of his life. And perhaps it was this knowledge that made me realize that I wanted to live the best version of my life down here, so that when I did see him again, and I will see him again, I can tell him that I built that mountain cabin in your name on the equator in Nanyuki, and that I did learn to ride a motorbike on the streets of Surrey, and that I did have my own radio show in Nairobi, and that I did drive that tuk-tuk around the island of Sri Lanka. And as I had these amazing, life-changing experiences, I was filled with a sense of gratitude. And so I began to write in my gratitude journal every day. And this simple act of giving thanks made me realize just how much I had and not how much I had lost. If each and every one of us here gave thanks for what we had, we would cultivate so much happiness. Human connection became a big part of my healing, because without it, I was drowning in the meaninglessness of it all. When we are connected to one another, we are connected to our very own souls. And when we nourish connections, we nourish ourselves and each other. Altruism, the act of giving, is hardwired in us as a species. That act of giving to someone else and creating a bond with no expectation of a reward is reward in itself. As a way to channel my grief, I set up an education fund in Jeremy's name. And we now support 15 children through secondary and tertiary education in northern Kenya. What could you do to make someone's life just that bit happier? Because believe me, it will come back tenfold. Compassion, the act of kindness and spirit of generosity to people, animals, and the environment was so important. But compassion must start with the self. Looking after oneself, eating well, sleeping well, but also giving oneself gratitude and self-love. And as my compassion for myself and others grew, I realized I had to make sense of this loss that I was feeling. And so I trained as an end-of-life doula, someone who sits with the terminally ill as they transition from this life to whatever is next. perhaps helping with funeral arrangements or legalities of death, or just listening to them as they talk about their fears of dying, or holding their hand as they take their last breath so that no one dies alone if they don't want to. If I could do that for Jeremy, then I could definitely do it for anyone else. Holding space for someone in need is such a humbling experience. It makes us realize what is important in life. And so using all these techniques, I began to heal. I began to believe in life again, and I began to believe in myself again. And I began to believe that the path I was on was the one I was supposed to be on. I began to realize what the meaning of life was. And if we are looking at the big picture, what could be bigger than the meaning of life? You must decide what the meaning of life is for you. And if it is simply to be happy, as the Dalai Lama says, then it is up to you to cultivate that happiness. It is up to you to embrace the grief of loss that you will definitely encounter in this lifetime, and change that vulnerability and pain into courage and compassion. I believe that the big picture and the meaning of life is about being happy today, every day, now. Being happy is a decision that we make, a brave one, in the face of and as a response to all challenges that life will throw us every single moment. The big picture is being happy. The big picture is now. Thank you.